The morning sun spilled across the quiet suburb like melted gold, glinting off the chrome of parked cars, and the dew still clinging to manicured lawns. Jacob Myers stepped out of his front door, coffee in hand, the steam curling lazily into the crisp air. It was a kind of calm that promised a good day, or at least it should have. He pressed the garage remote, expecting to see the neat concrete floor, his tools stacked perfectly on the shelves, and his empty parking spot waiting. Instead, a red SUV filled the entire space. Jacob froze. The mug tilted in his hand until coffee sloshed over his fingers. He blinked once, twice, as if the image might vanish if he stared long enough. But it didn't. The SUV sat there bold as brass, sun glinting off its spotless paint. He took a few steps closer, squinting at the license plate. He didn't recognize it. Then he saw the tag hanging from the rearview mirror. An HOA parking permit. A slow burn crawled up his neck. "You've got to be kidding me," he muttered. He circled the car like a detective at a crime scene. It wasn't just inside his garage, it was centered perfectly, as if parked there deliberately. He checked the side walls. No dents, no forced entry. Someone had simply opened his garage door and driven in. He knew exactly who. Jacob crossed the lawn to the neighboring house, jaw tightening with every step. The garden was too perfect, rows of petunias lined up like soldiers. The flag by the mailbox fluttered stiffly. He rang the bell. It took a full minute before the door opened, and when it did, Lena appeared. Mid-40s, blonde hair pulled into a bun, so tight it looked painful, lips painted in a red that matched her SUV. Her smile was sweet in the way sugar can be sharp. "Morning, Jacob. Everything all right?" "Lena," he said evenly, "your car is in my garage." "Oh, that." She waved her manicured hand as if he'd mentioned a misplaced newspaper. Jack needed to move it for a bit. HOA rules, no street parking overnight. "That's not your driveway," he replied. Her eyes flicked over his shoulder toward his house, then back to him. "Well, technically, it's community property. We all agreed to be flexible, didn't we?" He blinked. "No, Lena. It's my property. My garage." "Don't be so dramatic," she said, her smile thinning. "It's just for today. My son's car needed a spot for washing, and he didn't want to violate the HOA guidelines. I thought you'd understand." "Understand." His voice cracked into a laugh that wasn't amused. "You broke into my garage." "Oh, Jacob." She sighed like a teacher correcting a slow student. "Let's not use words like broken. You leave your code keypad uncovered. Anyone could, well, mistake it for shared access. It's safer this way. Keeps the neighborhood orderly." From behind her came the sound of footsteps and a lazy voice. "Yo, Mom, we done here?" Jack appeared, tall, cocky, 20 years old at most, with a grin that screamed untouchable. He looked Jacob up and down. "Nice garage, man. Way bigger than ours." Jacob stared at him. "Move the car." "Now." Jack shrugged. "Mom said it's fine. Chill out." Lena's eyes flashed. "Jacob, please don't take that tone with my son. He's just following instructions. You know how young men can be." Jacob felt his pulse pound against his temple. "I don't care. Move the car." Her voice dropped into a colder register. "You're being unreasonable. We all have to share space in this neighborhood. The HOA gives me certain privileges as vice president, and I'd appreciate it if you respected that." He took a slow breath, fists clenching at his sides. "Privileges don't include trespassing." Lena's lips curled into something between a smirk and a warning. "You might want to be careful throwing accusations around. I could file a complaint for harassment." Then she shut the door. For a long moment, Jacob stood there staring at the smooth, white paint of her front door. A bird chirped from somewhere nearby, the sound far too cheerful for the heat building in his chest. He walked back to his garage. The SUV gleamed in the morning light, the hood reflecting the blue of the sky. He pressed the garage button, watching the door descend slowly, cutting off the view like a curtain falling at the end of a bad play. Inside the house, his phone buzzed. A message from his wife, Amy. "Hey, hun. How's the morning? Did you talk to Lena about the HOA meeting?" He typed back, "Talked, yeah. She parked in our garage. A moment later. What? Are you serious? Just call the HOA. He did. The woman who answered sounded rehearsed, bored, and far too familiar with Lena's name. Oh, yes, Mrs. Harrington mentioned she might use your garage temporarily, the voice said. Something about driveway maintenance? Jacob's grip tightened around the phone. She doesn't have permission. Well, the woman sighed. She's vice president. It's not unusual for her to make temporary adjustments. I'm sure it'll be cleared up soon. Temporary adjustments? He repeated. To my house. Please don't raise your voice, sir. We encourage neighborly communication. The call ended before he could reply. He set the phone down carefully, as if it were fragile. His pulse was hammering in his ears. Outside through the blinds, he saw Jack laughing with a friend, tossing a football in his driveway like nothing had happened. Lena was standing nearby, clipboard in hand, chatting with another neighbor. Everyone smiled at her, polite and deferential. The queen of the cul-de-sac. Jacob stared until his reflection blurred in the glass. He'd moved to this neighborhood for peace, not politics. He'd paid too much for the house, too much for the dream of quiet. And now this woman thought she could waltz into his property and rewrite the rules. The sun climbed higher, turning the street to white heat. The SUV sat motionless in his garage, a crimson monument to arrogance. He thought of calling the police, but stopped himself. Lena would twist it somehow. She always did. HOA disputes weren't crimes, she'd argue. It would only make him look petty. Instead, he walked outside again, trying to look casual. He leaned against his mailbox, pretending to scroll on his phone. Lena's laugh drifted across the street, sharp and confident. When her eyes met his, she smiled sweetly, as though nothing was wrong. Then she turned back to her conversation, dismissing him without a word. That smile was worse than an insult. It said, I'm untouchable. Jacob stood there until his coffee had long gone cold. The SUV's reflection shimmered faintly in the garage window. Somewhere inside him, irritation hardened into something colder, quieter, more deliberate. By sunset, he had replayed every word, every smirk, every shrug. He had thought about the way her tone implied ownership and the way her son had grinned at him. He didn't shout. He didn't slam doors. He just sat on the porch, the air cooling around him, the cicadas beginning to hum. The garage door stayed closed. The red SUV remained inside, patient and smug. He whispered to himself almost absently, if they want to play games, fine. Let's play. And as the last light of day vanished, his reflection in the window smiled back, tired, sharp, and entirely done being polite. The next morning, Jacob woke to the sound of an engine starting. He hurried to the window, half hoping it had all been a bad dream. But the red SUV was still in his garage, idling smugly like it owned the place. Lena stood beside it, coffee cup in hand, robe cinched tight, watching the sunrise as if she were on her own porch. Her son Jack leaned against the hood, scrolling through his phone. They were comfortable, too comfortable. Jacob went outside barefoot, still in his t-shirt and flannel pants. You said it was just for a day, he called out. Lena turned, that same infuriating smile on her face. Good morning to you, too. It's still temporary. Temporary, he said, walking closer. It's been over 24 hours. She raised a brow. Well, my driveway's being power washed today. We can't have vehicles there until the sealant dries. It's only proper maintenance, Jacob. It's trespassing. Semantics, she replied lightly, sipping her coffee. I already informed the HOA. Everything's documented. He wanted to shout, but she gave him that warning look, the kind people in authority give when they know they're protected. Jack smirked from the driver's seat, revving the engine just enough to make Jacob step back. Lena's voice softened. I understand this is frustrating, but let's be adults. No need to escalate something so minor. Then she turned and walked away, robe fluttering like a flag of victory. By noon, Jacob drafted a short note and taped it to the SUV's driver window. Remove this vehicle immediately. You are parked on private property. He printed it in bold letters, black marker pressed, so hard it nearly tore the paper. When he returned later that evening, the note was gone. In its place, a new message was scrawled on a sticky note. Patience, neighbor. L. Jacob's jaw clenched so tightly it hurt. Over the next few days, the red SUV became a fixture in his garage. Sometimes it was there in the morning, sometimes gone for hours, always returning before nightfall. Jack started leaving things behind, a pair of sunglasses, a fast food cup, once even a beach towel slung over Jacob's tool rack. Every trace felt like a fingerprint of mockery. Jacob tried to stay calm. He emailed the HOA, filing a formal complaint with pictures. No response. He called the office twice, only to be told they were reviewing his submission. Then, 2 days later, he received a notice in his mailbox. Resident conduct warning, disrespectful communication toward HOA board member. He reread it 3 times, disbelieving. She'd flipped it. Lena had turned the narrative against him. Amy called that night, her voice anxious over the phone. Jacob, maybe just let it go. I don't want you getting fined again. He stared at the ceiling. She's parked in my garage, Amy. That's not something you let go. I know, she sighed, but people like her, she's connected. You don't win by fighting. He hung up quietly, her words replaying like an echo. You don't win by fighting. But he wasn't so sure anymore. The next morning, he decided to try one more time, civilly, face to face. He knocked on Lena's door again. This time, she opened with a clipboard in hand, mid-conversation on her phone. Oh, Jacob, she said into the receiver, hold on a sec. My neighbor's here again. Then to him. Something I can help you with? Move the SUV, please. Her voice was cool, practiced. You're becoming hostile. It's very concerning. Hostile. Yes, she said, jotting something on her clipboard. You've come to my house twice unannounced. It's starting to feel like harassment. I may have to report it. He laughed, a short, bitter sound. You parked in my garage, and I'm the one harassing you? She didn't answer, just gave him a tight smile before closing the door. The sound of the latch sliding into place was oddly final. That evening, Jacob came home late from work. The garage door refused to open at first, grinding halfway before jamming. He stepped out of the car, squinting through the dusk. The SUV was still there, parked slightly crooked, blocking his way. He dropped his briefcase, stood in the middle of the driveway, and let out a long, exhausted breath. This wasn't just arrogance, it was domination. A power play. Lena wanted control, and she'd found the perfect stage for it. The HOA, the rules, the pretense of civility. He took out his phone and began recording, narrating quietly. This is day 5. Same vehicle. No authorization. Multiple complaints filed. No action taken. He panned the camera slowly, capturing everything. When he finished, he uploaded the video privately. Not for views. For evidence. 2 more days passed. The SUV remained. The smell of gasoline mixed with the faint sourness of old food from Jack's cups. Jacob could barely stand walking into his own garage. He started parking on the street, seething each night as he looked at the locked door, hiding their car. On the 7th day, he woke to find a fresh HOA notice taped to his front door. Reminder: street parking is prohibited overnight. Violations will incur fines. He stared at it, then laughed. The kind of laugh that came from the edge of disbelief. Lena's SUV had taken his garage, and now the HOA, her HOA, was punishing him for parking outside. It was brilliant in a twisted way. By the weekend, the whispers started. Neighbors glancing, murmuring when he passed. Lena chatting in her yard, her voice carrying phrases like uncooperative and poor attitude. That night, Jacob couldn't sleep. He sat on the porch, the suburban quiet pressing down on him. From across the street, the faint light from Lena's house glowed through her curtains. A silhouette passed, a tall one, probably Jack. Then Lena appeared beside him, handing him something. He heard their laughter, muffled but cruel. He stared until his eyes burned. The next morning, he decided on one last attempt at reason. When Jack came out to wash the SUV, music blasting, Jacob walked up. Jack, he said evenly, move the car. Last warning. Jack didn't even look at him. Mom says it's fine. Your mom's wrong. Jack smirked, flicking water at his shoes. Guess you should have joined the board, man. Maybe then you'd have some say. Jacob's pulse roared in his ears. He turned away before he did something stupid. That night, he sat in the dark, watching through the blinds as the SUV's headlights swept into the garage once again. The sound of the door closing echoed through the house like a challenge. He opened his laptop, searching terms he'd never thought to Google before. Property rights versus HOA authority. Trespass by neighbor with HOA approval. Non-violent ways to deal with entitled neighbors. One result caught his eye, a forum thread titled Creative Justice for HOA Bullies. He clicked it. The comments were a mix of stories, half funny, half vindictive. Someone had filled a neighbor's pool with biodegradable paint. Another had planted onions along a property line until the smell drove their rival indoors. And then one post, short and almost poetic, stood out. When people treat your property like their own, remind them what comes with it. He leaned back in his chair, reading the sentence again. Slowly, an idea began to form, not born from anger, but from something sharper, calmer. He didn't sleep much that night, but when dawn came, there was no hesitation in his eyes. He opened the blinds, staring at the red SUV sitting smugly behind his garage door. And he smiled quietly, coldly, because he finally knew exactly what to do. Jacob spent the morning driving through back roads outside town, the sky overcast and heavy with the promise of rain. The fields stretched endlessly, dotted with weathered barns and the faint shapes of grazing cattle. He turned down a dirt road until he reached a small dairy farm, one he'd visited before through work. The owner, a grizzled man named Tom, was hosing down a tractor near a row of feed bins. When he saw Jacob step out of the truck, he lifted a hand in greeting. "Morning, Jacob. What brings you out here?" Jacob hesitated just long enough to make it sound casual. "Got a bit of a situation back home. You still cleaning out the holding pits?" Tom laughed. "You mean the sludge tanks?" "Always. Nasty stuff. Why? Any chance you'd part with a barrel or two?" Tom wiped his hands on his jeans, studying him. "That's an odd favor to ask." Jacob smiled faintly. "Let's just say I've got a pest problem." Tom shrugged. "As long as you're not doing anything stupid, I'll fill one up." An hour later, Jacob drove back toward the suburbs with a sealed drum of thick, brown sludge strapped to the bed of his truck. The smell seeped faintly through the metal, earthy and sour, like a warning. The closer he got to home, the more the calm suburban streets felt unreal, too polished, too artificial. He parked in his driveway just as the sun began to sink, painting the neighborhood in warm light that felt undeserved. The red SUV gleamed from inside his garage, its paint glowing like a polished trophy. Jacob checked his security cameras, made sure every angle was recording, then backed the truck into position. The hose snaked from the drum to the nozzle, heavy and sluggish. He stood there for a moment, his reflection staring back from the SUV's windshield. Then he turned the valve. The sound was wet and immediate, a slow gurgle followed by a steady gush. The first stream of sludge splattered against the hood, spreading in thick waves across the metal. It dripped down the sides, over the roof, across the windshield, coating the red beneath layers of brown. The smell hit him next, pungent and unmistakable, filling the air with a stench that made his eyes water. He didn't stop. He worked methodically, every movement deliberate, the way someone might repaint a wall they'd grown tired of looking at. The sound of dripping filled the garage, rhythmic and oddly satisfying. When he was done, he stood back and admired the ruin he'd made. The SUV looked unrecognizable, like something dredged from a swamp. He took a photo, then another. Then he typed a short message into the HOA group chat and attached the pictures. "Found an unauthorized vehicle on my property. Took care of it." He hit send. The response came fast. Notifications exploded across his phone. Dozens of messages, question marks, and shocked emojis. Then Lena's name appeared in bold letters. "What did you do?" Jacob turned off his phone. It took less than 10 minutes for her to arrive. The sound of her heels on the driveway echoed like gunshots. The garage door was open when she reached it, the smell rolling out in waves. Her scream was sharp, piercing the evening stillness. Jack ran up behind her, stopping dead when he saw the SUV. "Oh my God," he muttered. "It's everywhere." Lena spun on Jacob, eyes wild, face flushed. "You lunatic. You destroyed my car." Jacob stood at the threshold of his porch, hands in his pockets. "Your car was trespassing. I treated my property. Nothing illegal about that." "That's biohazardous waste," she shrieked. "You'll pay for this." "Already did," he said quietly. "Every day you park there." She stormed forward, finger jabbing the air. "I'm calling the police." "Good," Jacob said, gesturing toward the security camera above the garage. "Make sure they see the footage." Her mouth opened, then closed. Jack was gagging now, wiping his shoes after stepping too close. The stench was unbearable. It clung to everything. A few neighbors peeked out from their windows, drawn by the shouting. Someone started recording on their phone. When the police arrived, Jacob stayed calm, arms folded, while Lena launched into her tirade. "He vandalized my property. He poured manure on my car." The officer looked from her to Jacob, then to the SUV dripping sludge onto the driveway. "Sir, is this your garage?" Jacob nodded. "Yes, officer. The car isn't mine. I've filed multiple complaints about unauthorized use of my property. All documented. I simply applied organic compost within my space this morning. Didn't realize someone left a vehicle inside." Lena sputtered, words colliding with rage. "He's lying. That's malicious intent." The officer frowned. "Ma'am, from what I can see, this is private property. You admit you parked there?" Lena hesitated. "It was temporary." "That's still trespassing," the officer said evenly. "Civil matter, not criminal. You can take it up with the HOA." She looked ready to explode, but the officer was already walking away, shaking his head. The crowd that had gathered began to whisper, phones out, recording everything. By the next morning, the video was online. Someone from the neighborhood had posted it with the caption, "HOA Vice President gets a taste of karma." It spread faster than Jacob expected. Hundreds of comments, some horrified, most amused. When he stepped outside, people nodded or smiled faintly as they passed. No one said much, but the message was clear. They knew. At the next HOA meeting, Lena tried to restore her authority. She wore a stiff blazer and forced a smile as she addressed the group. But the air in the room was different now. Cooler, sharper. Jacob sat quietly near the back, waiting. When the agenda reached neighborhood disputes, he stood. He handed out printed copies of his emails, photos, timestamps from his security cameras, even the official parking violation notices he'd received. He spoke plainly, his voice calm but unwavering. "I followed every rule, every regulation. The only person who didn't was standing right there." Lena's composure cracked. "You set me up. You humiliated me." Jacob's gaze didn't waver. "No, you did that yourself." The room fell silent. Then the HOA president, a gray-haired woman who rarely spoke, cleared her throat. Effective immediately, Lena Harrington is removed from her position as vice president. All in favor. Every hand in the room went up. Lena's face turned pale. She gathered her papers with trembling hands and walked out, her heels clicking fast against the tile. Jack trailed behind, avoiding everyone's eyes. Weeks passed. The red SUV was gone, sold off quietly. The stains on Jacob's driveway faded with each rainfall, but the memory stayed sharp. The neighborhood was quieter now. People waved more. Even the HOA emails grew polite, stripped of their old arrogance. One morning, Jacob stood in his driveway again, coffee in hand, the sunlight catching on clean concrete. The air smelled of wet grass, not sludge. He exhaled slowly, a smile ghosting across his face. Justice hadn't just been served. It had been handcrafted, measured, and delivered. Across the street, a moving truck backed into Lena's driveway. She stood near it, sunglasses on, pretending not to see him. But when their eyes met briefly, she turned away first. Jacob raised his mug slightly in a silent toast. Then he turned back toward his house. Inside, his security monitor blinked quietly, recording nothing but peace. The garage door stood open, empty and waiting.